Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Wednesday, May 3rd, 2017 edition of VR News. Let's start with the Sony PlayStation VR platform and a promo that GameStop and Amazon are conducting right now on their online shops. No word on how long this promo is going to last, but today, at least probably the next few days, purchase the $400 US PlayStation VR bundle and they will throw in the PlayStation 4 camera as well. Estimated worth of that, according to the article, is about $60. And of course, the assumption is there, you've got the PlayStation 4, you've got the Move controllers, you don't have the camera or the VR. Because of course, there's the $500 US bundle, which has all of the above thrown in, except obviously the PlayStation 4. So if you were on the fence, you were wanting to get a PlayStation VR, but waiting for a sale, a price break, now might be the opportune time to do exactly that. Next up, VR being used to pitch a show based on Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere universe. Now, Brandon Sanderson is the author that took over posthumously for Robert Jordan, the author of the Wheel of Time series. And that thing was a monster of a series. 12 to 14 books in total. I think he died with probably about 3, maybe 4 books left. I stopped at about book 5. It was just getting really long in the tooth for me personally. I just wasn't feeling it anymore. But that's how Brandon Sanderson kind of got his foot into the door writing books, at least in terms of mainstream popularity. Robert Jordan's widow having selected him to continue the books. With that foothold, he was able to develop the Cosmere universe, well, something he had been working on, and the series, the Stormlight Archive, which I love, first book, Way of Kings. The rights to that universe purchased by a Chinese company called DMG Entertainment, apparently some nice 7+ number figure that they ended up going with. So he's probably set up pretty well from that. That was announced back in March. Fast forward to the last few days, and it's announced that as a marketing tie-in for that movie adaptation for The Way of Kings that they're working on, they will be releasing a 15-minute virtual reality experience. So, love seeing movie companies do that, like with John Wick. Hope that's something they continue to do. I think just like with the AAA publishers, we talked about that the other day, if they could come up with some kind of tight DLC type VR experience, at least for the interim, it gives everybody a lot more VR to try and play, but it also gives them the experience as they're waiting for that critical mass that they can deliver a much more expensive VR offering to. So very, very cool. We'll definitely try that out when it gets released. This next story, wireless VR, kind of the promise that we've been talking about since summer of last year. About a week ago, I featured 6 competing wireless products. IMR, which is Immersive Robotics, was one of those. Road to VR's Ben Lang was able to fly to their facility in Silicon Valley and do a hands-on test with the IMR wireless device. Now, he had tried this back at CES. He was a little disappointed. At the time, there was some latency and visual issues. Mostly visual, actually. The latency wasn't too bad. Now, of the 6 that I talked about the other week, it's only really TPcast so far that has met expectations, latency and graphically, as being acceptable for play. Other ones, not quite the case. And this, like I said, being one of those. But now, Ben, having gone back a few months later, says that if you put him in a blind test and had a wired VR station and, of course, the untethered wireless IMR, he'd be hard-pressed based on latency to tell the two apart. It was not noticeable. What he did notice was a graphical difference. Now, there's generally 3 ways for these companies to go about the wireless. The first, use a very fast wireless technology like 60 gigahertz. The second, and that comes with its advantages and disadvantages. The second, compression. The third, a combination of the first and second. Generally, when it's 2.4 or 5 gigahertz being the wireless that's used. IMR is using compression, strictly compression, and they have a proprietary one. It's not a commercially available compression algorithm that they say can get 95% compression. And Ben did notice there was a bit of a graphical difference between the tethered unit for a game like Space Pirate Trainer and the IMR untethered unit. But the company indicated to him that we will be able to dial back the compression. So right now it's at 95%, which is super aggressive. In the future, for the commercial release, we'll be able to select 90, 85, 80, etc. The trade-off there is better graphics, but now you start creeping into the latency a bit. So if they can improve again as much as they did from CES to today, I'm pretty confident they're going to have something that will be pretty damn sweet. Definitely going to keep an eye on that. That is IMR's wireless VR solution. Next up, some musical chairs. We've talked about people moving. We don't always know where the hell they're going, nor do some of us really care. For those who do, a couple of quick updates. So HTC has appointed ex-Disney and Spotify exec as their Vive Europe general manager. Spent about 5 years at Disney, a year and a half at Spotify, senior vice president at both of those companies. So he joins HTC as their Vive Europe GM. So very cool for him. That is going to be a pretty good payday. I can guarantee you that. Next up, another bit of musical chairs. This time, Survios Head of Studio, Chris Hewish. Talked about him leaving. We now know where he's going. He is joining Skydance Media as their executive vice president of interactive projects. So I can kind of see why he did that move. Obviously, VR, being in its infancy, it's going to be pretty unstable position-wise. Well, now with this media company, they've got their eggs in more than just the VR basket. They're across a few disciplines. He's going to get a little bit more stability. So there we go. That's what happened to Chris Hewish. On to more exciting things. Always a sucker for the tech. PlayStation apparently had prototyped Minority Report style gloves. And this, according to Dr. Richard Marks, who's part of Sony's Magic Labs. They are the research and development team. He said they had an intern. One unit was generated by our interns, and that was one of a lot of different prototypes that were developed but ultimately went nowhere. The interns saw the movie Minority Report. The next morning they built this to do the same kind of input for a game system. Never saw the light of day, and he basically summed it up by saying, it can be difficult if you invest a lot of your time as a researcher and then it doesn't end up going past some point. It's a difficult thing to let go and realize it's just not the right thing for your company. So I'd imagine, that is the type of technology that you're going to wait to kind of get perfected. For a company like Sony, I don't see them being aggressive and experimental in that way. So I can understand why that was probably shut down. Now, mind you, somebody comes out with something innovative that works, then they maybe come out. But for a lot of them, it's simply waiting for much larger adoption rates. John Riccatello in the news again. According to him, what he would like to see is the equivalent of LittleBigPlanet. This was a game on the PlayStation Portable and PlayStation 3, if I remember correctly. I remember it was a popular platformer, puzzle-style game, strategy. You could build levels, if I remember. Not something I tried, but again, I remember there were favorable reviews for the game specifically. So where he ties that type of an experience into is the tool sets that they have available. And they've got two. They've got Carte Blanche. This is for virtual reality. And then they've got Editor VR. And of the two, he says, Carte Blanche probably more suited to creating that LittleBigPlanet type of experience. To which he said, somebody is going to go out and build with Unity the equivalent of LittleBigPlanet. So here's 100 assets or 1,000 assets, and you can import them and build your own game out of that in carte blanche. But if you're really going to get down and edit the actual pieces, you're going to need some level of editor capability that's probably beyond carte blanche. So you're going to have to intersect with the two. And really, a way of picking up the slack, start with the carte blanche. There's probably things you're going to do in Editor VR and probably things neither can do. So as a developer, you're going to be left with looking elsewhere for that type of tool, or of course, building your own. And that's not necessarily out of the question. Yes, it can be expensive, but look at Wilson's Heart. Perfect example. They could have gone with a Unity. They could have gone with an Unreal. They chose to build their own engine. Not many do that because it's resource intensive and expensive, and yet they did. And the advantage is if it's a good engine, yeah, you can license it, you can recoup a lot of that effort, and eventually if it's big enough, obviously Unreal was, you know, not just break even, but come out ahead. Next news story, E3 2017, examples of exhibitors and what they're going to be showing starting to trickle in. Not going to go into huge detail because there's only about 3 exhibitors that have, talked to Upload VR about what we can expect of their booths and their presence. As we get closer and more announce that, I'll do an update on E3. Next up, another story on Amazon. This time, Amazon working on a completely new VR shopping experience. And this is based on a posting that they had looking for a senior software development manager in VR for its Seattle offices. In that listing, they state they are looking to revolutionize online shopping for millions of customers worldwide, seeking someone to lead the development of a completely new VR shopping experience at Amazon. So, according to the article, makes it clear they are working on a way to let us buy things with our HMDs. Also listed in that posting, the type of experience and the devices they would prefer experiencing in. And it mentions all the big ones: Rift, Gear VR, Vive, PlayStation VR, Google Daydream. So now, just to talk about that for a second, one of the challenges with online shopping has always been not being able to touch, feel, visually assess an item. I do a lot of ordering online. A lot of people do a lot of ordering, but there are certain physical objects that you just prefer to purchase in person. The promise of VR to me is kind of twofold. Not only are you going to be able, with the right haptics technology, we will get to that point, hold an object in your hand, feel it, look at it, study it up close, but you're going to have all the facilities within the shopping experience to see the measurements instantly, import. Maybe it's your living room because you're looking at a sectional or a big screen TV. You import your media room, test it out on the wall. I think that's where they want to go. These are the steps to get them there. So imagine what that could look like 10 years from now. Amazon, the internet, really, other than added security, streamlined, more efficient, the core technology for the point of sale really not miles better than what it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. With VR, it could take an absolute quantum step to really not having much of a reason to be there in person for the shopping experience. Next up, Chris Roberts. According to him and VentureBeat, who wrote the article, he feels under no pressure to make Star Citizen absolutely perfect. I don't buy it, not completely. I understand what he's trying to say, but I think there is a lot of pressure. They raised a hell of a lot of money, $100 million plus. That is huge. That's basically the budget of a Hollywood movie. You could look at that a whole bunch of different ways in terms of how freaking massive that amount of money is. Purely for Star Citizen, a game that's been almost in continual beta. and will be for a considerable amount of time. It's a game I will get. Haven't paid much attention to it, spend most of my time on Elite Dangerous because it's not at the point to get me excited yet. It'll get there, I'm confident of that. My worry is the length of time. The problem is if you wait too long, you'll always get to those points, and this is what happened to Duke Nukem Never, or Duke Nukem Forever, where they kept having to update the engine, because what they used when they started was obsolete 3 years down the road, then the next one and the next one. I can't remember how many they went through, but it was at least a handful of different engines and, graphical technology. There were a lot of challenges because of the time frame. And I think that's one of those things that as we, start really distancing from that initial launch, when we start getting to the decade mark, it's going to be hard, really hard to be impressed unless they continue to modernize. And I know they've done that already at least once, but it's going to happen more frequently. And the last story, this one also from VentureBeat, combating VR sickness with what this company is calling user experience design. Company is Well Told Entertainment, and they are a maker of VR games. And what's interesting about the article is they go through the process from start to finish, how they built their game around being comfortable and not triggering virtual reality sickness in people. And it's pretty interesting. It's a long article, not going to go in huge detail. I've been rambling enough already. But there is a checklist. A couple of those it's easing the users into the experience, being wary of the speed. Be careful with speed transitions. If it's really fast, consider vehicles. Just some really good constructive stuff that hopefully other developers from much bigger companies have a read, because I think it's some solid stuff there for sure. All right, guys, that is it for the Wednesday edition of VR News Hump Day. Hope you guys are having a great week so far. As always, guys, cheers.